If council's ready, we will reconvene. Thank you for the lunch. Ariana, I suppose she's not here right now, but that was a good lunch. So, Matt, take it away. Thank you.
All right, so we are digging into municipal services. You guys are going to have to keep Mark on point, all right? If we want to get out of here at 4:30, you make sure you keep him on point through his presentation. Like Mark said previously, the functions that he oversees as Director of Municipal Services is where we spend over 50 cents of every tax dollar, so it's a good place to get invested. Yeah, take it away, Mark.
Okay, as I said at orientation, I'm your big spender. There's lots of detail within budget here, so we're going to start at function 26, which is municipal enforcement. A very small department, 2-man operation, 2 patrol units owned by the department because both of them are generally out on patrol together. And aside from that, we don't have any backup units. Iterate that we did lose a unit last winter, and now we had to put somebody into just a regular county truck, and they could only enforce bylaws from that truck until the other individual was capable of giving them their CPO unit to do their full duties. So anyway, with this, the only thing is going on this year or proposed for 2022 anyway, really are bikes and bike racks. We have our municipal partnerships for enforcement with Town of Bazzano, Village of Duchess Rosemary. We have our urban hamlets, Rolling Hill, Scandia, Lake Newell Resort, Tilly, Patricia. We'd like to get our officers with more boots on the ground out of the vehicles, be a little bit more open for engagement with the public, be able to see some health benefits reaped as well, I guess, from this. We're talking about pathways as well with budget. How are we going to keep people interested, safe, keep people that shouldn't be on the pathway with motorized ATVs and things like that off of pathways in remote areas? So we thought bikes would be a good one. We're not talking e-bikes here, at least not yet. We're talking pedal bikes, so they're going to have to use their own personal pedal power to get there like the Flintstones. But our officers are actually excited about this. Some of our municipal enforcement partners are actually excited to see what can come around with that as well. So that's really it. E-ticketing software, this is something that's going on from the province. Everything is moving to e-ticketing, so the officers will issue you your direct ticket at the time that you've had an offense. It gets printed off much like a till tape that you get for your receipt from Walmart or anywhere, and that's your full ticket. Those things have been going on in the past, and we're going to continue to meet the province's expectations with legislation and stuff moving forward there. So really small department, some revenue generated from ticketing. Can't always guarantee when that revenue is coming in because it's always processed by the courts and we get it when it goes through that system. So is there any questions on function 26?
Lerner, please. Go ahead.
Do we still have an agreement with the village, or is it the town of Hazar? We used to have enforcement there, correct?
That agreement, they haven't accessed that for a number of years now. It sits on my list to contact them to find out if they've finally resolved matters with Wheatland County or not for service provisions, or whether they still have an expectation. As it sits right now, it's a call for service. And as I said, we haven't been called out to Hazar for a number of years now.
Anyone else have questions? Seeing.
Awesome. Function 31, straightforward. This is fleet services. They are a internal service provider for multiple facets of the organization, from minibus servicing, preventative maintenance repairs, ag services, as well as municipal services on all of those fleet equipment and machinery matters. What you can see in there is just an increase to the hardware under IT stuff. Otherwise, we're status quo. Orientation, we talked about the vacant position of the fleet services supervisor, and the CIO and I are working through that matter as to how we're going to see that service capacity built back into that department. Are there any questions on function 31? And if there's anything that I'm moving too fast on, we can come back to it, but let me know.
Councillor Johnson, please.
If you've removed a position, why is the amount of the budget up? If you removed a position.
It's the hardware replacement, so the being able to work from home and stuff and being mobile.
Right, but when did the fleet service supervisor leave?
That was in September that the retirement took place.
And to be clear, the position hasn't been removed from budget. It's just not filled currently. So we're still going to be populating that with a body somewhere along the line.
We're good. So function 32. This is the big one. This is the one that council loves to throw me curveballs with, because we'll get through interim budget and think everything's good, and we'll have another project come out of the woodwork partway through the year. So this is where we do a lot of planning. We have a lot of long-term planning, a lot of short-term planning. We have a lot of things going on in here, from engineering to equipment, paving, overlays, pathways, road shoulder pull programs on gravel roads. We have the gravel road resurfacing program where your aggregates get spread every year. We have the gravel crushes and all of those big ticket items. Engineering is going to be coming down this year because we've had that investment in a number of studies over the past year. Gravel aggregate exploration. We'll be engaging council hopefully early in the new year over securement opportunities. That will definitely be some business intelligence that we keep in-house until we've got it secured. Grader operator training, I talked a little bit at orientation about this. We took on a new program of training with an individual, and so far we've extended the useful life of our grader blades by just about 2 times their life. We've seen a reduction in about 20% in the fuel consumed per day from the training that these 2 individuals received, and we want to roll that out to the rest of our grader operators. So been here 13 years now, and over that 13 years, we had started out with 10 grader operators in the organization. We are sitting at 8 currently. Saves the $500,000 replacement on a grader machine. It doesn't afford us to get around nearly as often as we used to. In fact, some days we scratch our head as to what we actually did, because we would have covered it that many more times. The more frequently you grade your roads, the quicker you break down your aggregate. Means you get to go back and re-gravel more often, because that aggregate rock does break down every time blades go over it. So some of the frequency is based on that. We have a retirement coming up here in November. We are going to attempt next year with 7 grader operators. I definitely want to see us get through the winter season, because it's really major snowfall events where we run into a time crunch. We have contracted services at the standby, so if we need an extra grader to push us back out to 8 service areas or something, we can do that. If we can get away with 7, that's a cost savings to the taxpayer. This natural attrition and changeover is when we really like to explore these things, find out whether we have that capacity or whether we don't. Ultimately, it comes down to the service level that council wants to deliver to the ratepayers. Right now, we're on about a 20-day rotation. This will take us to about a 24-day rotation. Talking working days, not month days. So it'll be 1 month and 1 week before you see a grader past your place again, if we continue doing roads the same way that we do. On top of that, fuel, oil, and other lubricants and stuff. I think everybody knows where the price at the pumps are going. Due to our purchasing volume through RMA and stuff, we do see better prices in volume than what we do at our local pumps. So that's how that works. And then continuing forward with the hardware through IT, keeping our workforce mobile. Working from home was a huge thing this year, and proud to say that over the past couple of years, we've gotten our entire outdoor staff mobile and being able to work with less paper, automatic filing of forms and stuff like that, rather than the paper shift in the office and such. And really, you're looking at $2.97 million in pathways. We're looking at some grant funding on 2.4, what did I have? It wasn't 2.4. 2.4 kilometers of pathway extending from the county building down to Township Road 18-2 here, which is the intersection of Lake Newell Resort. Following that, there's also the discussion of regional pathway down to Kinbrook Island. There is a subcommittee set up for that with the City of Brooks. We're working through those details and those budget items, but the high-level budget has it sitting at about the 2.97. One of the questions being on that got thrown out was the funding, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the funding as put in that email is accurate. It's just a matter of what the operational costs are. Is that correct?
The grant funding for the pathways, the 2.4 kilometers has been approved, yeah. The rest of the way to Kinbrook Island is pending. There's about $1 million hole there we're looking to fill. There are a few grant programs we're looking into submitting application to for that.
Councillor Screever, and then
That 2.97, is that just to 182, or is that all the way to Kinbrook?
That would be all the way to Kinbrook.
Okay, okay. And, okay, if there was, so the 1 to 182 is already approved and it's gonna start in the works?
Well, because of where we're at in the season, we won't tender that out until the new year.
Yeah, right.
And we'll look for construction first thing in the spring.
Okay, okay. And then what is the timeline to Kinbrook?
Well, I have a meeting scheduled for, I believe, Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock with committee to try to get the ball going again, at least from the administration side of things, until we get council members involved in that again. And that's really where we're going to be looking at getting that ball going. And it's a matter of that committee, county council, city council agreeing to if and when we proceed. Is it full funding? Is it funding does some of it have to come from the public? How is that that difference gonna be made up in a way? But a lot of what was summarized in Councillor Unruh's email is already there, from the city's commitment to the county's commitment and stuff like that. So there's a gap in there. The other thing that we've got hammered out from that email with question is it's approximately $2,000 per kilometer for maintenance per year. Of course, newer things cost less because the older things get, there's more crack sealing, there's other preventative maintenance. Service levels would have to be discussed. Are we snow clearing the thing all winter? Aren't we? What are we doing with it? And then what all other amenities are getting built along the pathway. One of my suggestions was to at least have some kind of shelter that people can seek if there is some kind of storm blow in. You're talking 12 kilometers of pathway with almost no refuge. But as for parking and stuff like that, you can park at the CRA, you can park in the city, you can park here at the county office and get on the pathway. You can park down at Kinbrook Island and get on the pathway, and basically assuming that people are going to be making the full trip. So if you're starting here, you're looking at about a 24-kilometer round trip. So figure it out. Unless council wants to put something in there, maybe we need another mode of transport.
thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I've just got a question on that. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, and I use the walking path here a lot. This one is 2.2 kilometers. Very few people do more than 3 laps. And if this council went out and tried to walk the 13 clicks, they'd be picking me up halfway down there, and the rest of you'd have a heck of a time. That's a long, long path with no shade, no nothing. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. 3 million is a lot of money. And I'm uncomfortable with just with the usage of it. Like there'll be a few people on bikes. I can't see anybody packing a lunch bucket out there and having a picnic after walking 12 clicks and then walking back home. It just, I don't, I like some other comments on it because it's scary.
Thank you. Ellen, Councillor Henry, did you have a comment? Okay, Councillor Scraver, please. Yeah.
So my feeling, I feel the same way with Neil on this, that to Kimbrook Island, that's a heck of a long way. I do, and many people in my division had said, listen, we should probably slow down all the way to Kimbrook. The reason is anybody who doesn't live either close to Kimbrook or I would rather, myself, I'd rather see, and the people in my division would like to see it go to Lake Newell Resort for safety and usage reasons rather than out to Kimbrook. Now, I have no idea as far as if there's government or the Alberta government money that's kicking in because of the park that's there. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I think as far as usage goes and distance goes, I think that out to Lake Newell Resort makes a heck of a lot more sense. But that's my input on that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh.
And I would have, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. And I would have to echo both Neil and Greg. Now, just to clarify, what was approved just to this little ways, to the one, was it 182, is it? That one is not in the almost $3 million one. This one is separate, correct?
No, it's included in that 3 million.
It is. Okay. So that was roughly over 500,000, was it not? Something like that?
550,000-ish, yeah.
Yeah. So okay, that's very clear. So that is included in the 3 million. Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
The people I've spoken to in my area are not in favor of the pathway going out there, don't feel it benefits themselves living in Division 4. It's not something to be accessed. And okay, I'll try to talk louder. Another thing I think wasn't looked at was fire risk. I mean, years like this, it's dry prairie. That path is going 12 kilometers. Where's the insurance liability if there's a fire off that path? Because fire is a huge issue when you live in the prairies.
Councillor Short.
Can I just get it clarified one more time? What money do you need from this budget to cover what portion of a path?
Yeah, so the pathway project is really a wild card. The only piece for certain that's going to get done complete next year will be the 2.4 kilometers. It all rolls up into that 3, but the second phase to Kimbrook is still a wild card, right? Previous council has already committed 700,000 towards that, and the city of Brooks has committed 700,000. So we've got 1.4 million that's already been committed, and we're looking for the next million to actually get it funded. If we submit grant applications and the answer is no, there's no money, if you go to the private sector and they say we're not funding, then you've got a project that, you know, funds have been committed to, but you don't, without that last million, it's not going anywhere.
And again, we're talking just to get it to Township 182?
Township 182 will happen next year. From 182 to Kimbrook is the wild card portion.
I have a question relative to what you said, Greg, about going to the resort instead. Is that a dynamic discussion at this point, that there's consideration for an alternate route?
I think historically, it always has been a discussion. It just has never come to fruition. And don't know whether I've got the greatest take on this or not, but what was being considered in this alignment is it's not connecting any one community to say Scandia or Lake Newell Resort or anybody's getting a benefit that the rest of the communities are not getting in Newell. It's connecting to a provincial park for tourism purposes. Now, obviously, you're going to have ratepayers that are going to use a pathway as well. Thoughts behind it are pathways do drive tourism. Some of the presentation was people come to communities just to log their kilometers on those pathways and see what the region has to offer. To date, we've got our 0.7 kilometer up to the CRA, and there's a little bit of a partnership. There was no real financial commitment from the County of Newell, but there is the Cody Martin Memorial Pathway from Dutchess going north to the Dutchess Golf Course, which is county-owned property. Those are the only two pathways within Newell that are paved. We don't care for, maintain, or do anything with the Cody Martin Memorial. That was all fundraised and done. We just facilitated the construction of it within purchasing 5 meters of land for the road allowance for which it was built in. Much the same as what we're proposing for this 2.4 kilometers adjacent to the building running south, and except this one would be ours. You've got Lacombe County, you've got things in and around Banff, Canmore, Bighorn, MD, and all that stuff. Those guys have pathways, and a lot of them. So I think the liability questions is what do they have to have on the on the books from RMA and insurance-wise, and what else has to happen with it. But that is part of this discussion. You were talking about the economic development, the tourism and stuff earlier today. What is it that we're going to do to try to bring it, I guess? And this is one of these initiatives that came out of the woodwork. And 13 years experience here. There was a regional pathway committee that got brought up. I believe Synovus Energy is the one that facilitated all of that for community development stuff. It really fell flat on its face, but they had big plans of extending things to Bazzano, Rosemary, Dutchess, covering the entire region. Well, you're talking multi-millions of dollars, right? But it's really going to be what is council's vision and how do we work with the rest of our partners in this region to make it happen. So that is why this is here, is because former council had this commitment. We are still in the discussion phases with committee, and there is nothing set in stone as of yet. We have a preliminary alignment to work with landowners on to try to secure things. There's a number of things that still have to come together to make that happen, right? So interim budget gets approved, it still may not move forward because maybe we don't like the tender prices that we see in it either, right?
Thank you, Councillor Scanderup, and then Councillor Unruh.
I wonder if the road from Brooks to Lake Newell, if it wasn't so crappy, if this would be such an issue. Because, this is the route I take in to town, across and down the Lake Road. And that new part out there by Rolling Hills Reservoir, that's beautiful. And there's a nice shoulder. You could easily ride a bike or whatever along there. And then you get to that section that's gone out to Lake Newell since I was 10 years old. And it's crappy. There's no shoulder. It's rough. And I just wonder if it had been upgraded, if we'd even be having the discussion.
I can say from my former career at the city of Brooks, town of Brooks, the Rotary Club had actually had a plan to build a pathway paralleling Highway 873 south to Kinbrook. I don't want to speak out of turn because I was never involved in those things. I was a support staff member in that, but I thought that I had heard at one point in time that they had actually had an agreement with Alberta Parks to take over the care and maintenance of it as well, so long as it fell within that road allowance. But you're talking 20 years ago. Things have changed. I guess the only thing I can encourage council to do is lobby the provincial government that when they do an overlay on Highway 873 to get it widened out. Professionally, I don't like putting cyclists near motorists. I would, and I definitely don't encourage people walking on the roads, although we have a couple communities that don't have sidewalks, so We have some unique signs that say walk on the left so you're facing the oncoming traffic, because at least you can see the hazard approaching rather than get smoked from behind, right? These are things that we're trying to contend with, and more you're looking at the work-life balance of things. You're looking at fitness and health and wellness of people. People want to get outdoors and do recreational things. And to be honest, the last 2 years, that's the only opportunity people have really had, is to get outdoors. Pathways seem to fit that bill. I can't tell you what the usage is going to be along a 12-kilometer stretch of pathway from this building to Kinbrook Island. Go back to the Field of Dreams movie and say, if you build it, they will come. It's going to get used. I don't know how often, but it will get used. If you build it right and you think about it, you know, we had discussions about starting with just a gravel pathway. That'll be suitable enough. Well, then we got to go grade the ruts out of it and whatever all else, right? If you pave it, it's done. It's a big investment, however. Future discussion with council. Can we move on?
Just quickly, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. You were mentioning the walk paths in Canmore and so on, and I understand from previous council members that they have a lot that are not paved either. You know what I'm saying? So I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, so that's pathways. 15 minutes. Grader replacements. So just so council's aware, we used to replace graders on a 5-year cycle. We used to have 10, as I said, so 2 every year. In my earlier days, we used to sell them for more than what we paid for them after 5 years of ownership. That is not the case these days. We're scratching 50% of the original purchase price if we're lucky. So we decided we would extend the useful life from 5 years to 7. We felt comfortable. We've now pushed it to 10. We've lost 2 $50,000 transmissions. We've lost 1 or 2 $50,000 engines. We have 1 backup grader in our fleet, so 2 machines down at the same time is not favorable for the County of Newell. Hence, backup support with contracted services for that limited time that we may or may not need them. So we've been sitting and we're looking at going forward with 4 replacements because we've pushed those machines beyond what we're comfortable. They're approaching that 10,000 hour mark, and we want them out of our fleet before they start costing us even more than just the $50,000 engine or transmission repairs. After that, we're proposing that we look at 10,000 hours on the machines, and whenever those other 4 or 5 machines come up, that's when we'll start flipping things out again. But 4 replacements because we postponed those purchases for a number of years now. Gravel roads, $1.8 million. This includes your road shoulder pull program, Range Road 15-1, Range Road 15-0 between Silver Sage Road and Highway 542 or Castles Road just west of the office here. Those have both been shoulder pulled this year. The drainage improvements are ongoing with that, with culvert replacements and whatnot. That's really what encompasses a lot of the $1.8 million on gravel roads. We also have the gravel road program and things like that. Bridge files, so $1.74 million. Bridge file 76697 for the question previously is north and east of Rosemary. Bridge file 72744 is straight south of Tilly. And on top of that, we also, those are both STIP funded programs through the Alberta government. And then the one bridge file that we made decision on based on its rating and whatnot, 76696, which is upstream of 6697. That is a non-STIP funded bridge file that just through procurement processes, cost savings by having multiple jobs in same area, we thought we would throw that in there and try to reap the benefits at the same time with a small contract to bump it up but save money for our ratepayers. EID partnership, this is a policy that's in place, joint policy with the Eastern Irrigation District. We are in year number 9, maybe moving into 10 now. $1 million commitment from each party, and that's going to improve major drainage courses as well as roadside drainage courses. significant overland flooding. We started out in Castles as our first project. We transitioned down to Rolling Hills. We've been through Scandia, Rainier South, Rainier North, Bull City. We've done some work in Millicent, and we are just wrapping up our first phase in Rosemary. We are going to fall about 4 kilometers short in Rosemary this year just because the EID's pulled out and they got to get moving on their pipeline work. So that's the commitment to that program. I can honestly tell council that Rosemary is the most significant overland flooding region that we have left in Newell. We do have phase 2s and a bunch of the stuff in the south that we would like to come back through and do to clean other things up. But the program is to reduce the overland flooding, and I'm not just talking farmland, I'm talking about the flooding of private property, homes, buildings, and other investments that people have out there. If we just do the roadside drainage, we don't do anything with the major drains in partnership with the EID, we just move the problem from one spot to another. The partnership with the EID is very beneficial because it takes it right to the receiving basin.
Councillor Johnson?
Do you see that drainage program going on in how many years in the future do you expect it to continue?
Well, we were very ambitious when we set forth with the program because it was a 3-year plan. And we're in year 10, I believe it is. I think, Neil, you were actually at the EID when we started that, maybe. So some people are more positive than I am. We figure we're going to be in Rosemary for 4 years. I figure we're going to be there longer. We have some very unique challenges with landowners and encroachments from pivots and stuff that are contending with how we can go about doing drainage improvements because they're pushing the property line with those infrastructures. 3 to 5 years in Rosemary at least, but I would say that we're probably going to try to keep this program in its perpetuity just because of the benefit of whatever we can add to the list. Let's add it to the list, but eventually we should be able to see that dollar figure come down because we'll have knocked off all the major stuff and maybe we can slow some of it. But at the same time, maybe there's other motivations to continue and pursue things with it.
Neil?
Yeah, this program has done unbelievably good work in the last 10 years. It's made some move drain ditches, move spillways, everywhere it goes, it leaves it better behind. And it's a real service to it's a real money maker for the people that own the land. They're doing a heck of a job.
Yeah, excellent recovery of productive land in many cases. I have any more discussion around the drainage? If not, I have a question there. Can you give us some context on not the history because it goes back quite a while, but Fisher Bridge in relation to what you talked about bridges? I know I learned about that one when I was going to Edmonton 10 years ago. So
that's just about when we first met, Arno. Okay, so Fisher Bridge is immediately straight south of the town of Bazzano, and it is sitting on the former Highway 847. As part of the de-gazetting of Highway 847, County Council negotiated with Alberta Transportation to see Fisher Bridge upgraded or at least replaced. It's a 100-year-old steel truss structure over top of the main canal coming into Newell that the Eastern Irrigation District has off the Bow River. With that, however, there is another bridge to the west, the Black Bridge. Spoke about this at orientation. When that bridge reaches its end of useful life, it will not be replaced. Fisher Bridge itself is, well, it was about $1 million back in the day when the estimates were run. I don't have any new numbers on that because it really hasn't been on the radar other than I keep reintroducing the subject to new councils so that it's on the radar and it doesn't get lost. Producers because they cannot move their equipment across them. They actually have to divert, I want to say it's about 10 to 12 kilometers around, if not further. Very inconvenient. It's not the greatest for oil and gas sector industry either because they too have to divert because of the width and height restrictions on those bridges. The county is responsible for building the road abutments to that, and that was about $1 million back in the day as well. And all of that sits in limbo until council and Alberta Transportation come to agreement as to the timing of that. Those 100-year-old steel truss structures, as long as you keep up with the preventative maintenance and replacing things and keeping things good, might be able to see another 30, 50 years out of those things. I don't know. But it's all about the dollars at the end of the day and how wisely you spend the taxpayer money, right? So transportation, limited funding and whatnot, always conscientious about how those funds are being spent and when those investments occur. So annual inspection of bridge files, that was another question. Through the BIMS system that Alberta Transportation has for managing bridges, they have, I don't know, there's like 3-4 pages of criteria that they go through and inspect and rate all of these things. And then the next time they come around to inspect a bridge file, all of that gets upgraded and the staff are looking at what criteria is changing. Do a weight restriction have to be imposed on that because it's failing? Do we need to put strutting in before we replace it? You know, we've talked about a number of things. We put strutting in on a bridge file, a culvert bridge file up in Rosemary Country. And one of the ratepayers was concerned that, well, the grasses or the straws coming from the fields might get caught up and take the volume, it's going to flood me out. Well, transportation isn't going to give us $300,000 to replace the bridge file when a $30,000 strut job meets the criteria facilitating the drainage coming off the land. That's how this works. So do you spend money frivolously and you rip it all out and you put in a brand new structure at 10 times the cost, 100 times the cost? Well, where do you draw the line? And just because we have the means, does it mean we do it? Or are we fiscally responsible and accountable to our taxpayers for the money being spent? That's really the nuts and bolts behind all of that. That's really my limited knowledge. The design for Fisher Bridge is done. I think it's a 3 culvert structure that was supposed to be built. Which is what we see in a lot of areas. In fact, there's a double immediately south of Bazzano on the bridge file in between, and that was $1 million replacement back in the day when we did that one. It'd help if people saw it. Road tour in the future.
Councillor Christman, yeah.
And just to update, we did meet with Municipal Affairs Minister McIver shortly after he came on to his new role. And so he's well aware of the situation. And I guess for me, unfortunately, as long as those inspections come back as a safe and viable way to transport both the Black Bridge and this 538, I think we're on hold. I mean, yes, it's an inconvenience for all the farmers in the area, specifically 2 large farmers that farm in the south, because they have to go quite a ways around with their big equipment. It's also unfortunate for truckers who are using GPS, because that's still showing up on GPS as a 3-numbered highway. And so they come over the hill and hit that narrow bridge, then they have to back up a 1/4 of a mile to get back en route to get out of their situation. So there are a lot of negatives, but there's a lot of dollar signs ahead of the decimals too. So that's where we're at with that situation.
Any other questions under road, streets, walks, and lighting? That was the only slide, wasn't it, Matt?
I just didn't want you to leave your budget. I have a question about a budget line. Are you going to go there, or should I ask now? Okay. Membership and conference fees, you've doubled that budget line. Can I pick your brain on that?
I'll beat Mark to it. That was from budget planning with the greater operator training, the 40,000 increase there. That's the lion's share of that.
Thank you.
And as per usual, we usually underspend on that account, but we're really hoping we can start getting back to attending things, which is going to happen this fall here, so. If not, I guess we're at airport, Matt. I don't really have a whole lot to say about the airport. This one, 50-50 ownership with the city of Brooks. So whoever sits, I forget who Neil got the airport commission. Whatever comes about through that will be presented back to us through the city to be added in for any future budgets. And then the other one is the 50-50 operational costs of the town of Bazzano Airport, which is relatively new to us through the ICFs and stuff. That's all I got for you on the airport. Pretty easy peasy. We've, just historically for council, we've done the avgas project out at the Brooks Regional Airport. That has been proven to be beneficial because pilots were not able to get fuel from anywhere else. The runways are in great shape and stuff from what the city's been doing out there annual and whatnot. So as far as I know, both airports are in good condition. Even the terminal received some upgrades and stuff there not too long ago. So, okay, 41. Water. I don't set the utility rates. I just drive the costs that drive utility rates. Costs are usually driven by the age of infrastructure. As you've already heard, we've done improvements in, or aware of, you know that we've done improvements in Scandia and Tilly, water, wastewater on both sides. So we've got Hamlet water services, and then we have rural water services. So Matt spoke to the regional transmission main and that transfer of asset to NRSC. They are now the owners of that. We have pipelines that come off of that regional transmission main that service our rural water customers. And that is through the trickle system or the low flow pressurized system. 300 imperial gallons delivered to those people per day. And generally most people are not using their full allocation. So you can see what we've got for rate increases in that between the rural and the hamlets. Rural water phase 2, former council committed to this one. Application is in for provincial consideration and funding. When we know more, we'll bring it back to this council so that you can get brought up to speed as to how many customers or service points we're talking about. What the full estimate looks to be $7.6 million. But there will have to be a registration process, find out how many people are going to take it up, how many people aren't going to take it up. Those costs could change because we're not dealing with a project that is in one area. We are trying to fill in the gaps. Those people that didn't think they were going to see a benefit, that really wish they would have taken up the benefit. It costs money to move people, particularly construction equipment for small jobs around the country. Perhaps we should have just done the full blown and been done with it, but that's not where we're at. And then the next thing is we've had people sell and people buy, and these new people want in. We've had new homes constructed on different parcels that they haven't been able to get in on the program either. So there's a lot of things that have changed in the 5 to 7 years that we've had the project and water service available. That we're looking to meet some expectations that we're hearing from the rural voice on getting service. H2O, sorry, Councillor Johnson.
My question is about, I'm looking at the costs and the hamlets, and I'm looking at the amount of water loss that we're seeing. How is that expensed? Is that a responsibility of the NRSC, that they have a benefit for managing zero water loss? Because these places like Rainier is still at 45%. The only one who's really good is Lake Newell. That's great. Everyone else loses a lot of water. So where is that cost? How are we dealing with that cost?
Operationally, back to the water user till we sort it out. Is it a matter of people bypassing water meters? Is it actual water loss through seepage in pipes? Is it theft of water through alternative means? We don't know. Generally, when you have a water leak, it'll come to the surface somewhere, sometime, and you will figure it out. There is nothing evident to show us or lead us to where we need to be investigating. So this is an ongoing, continued kind of thing. What was that, Matt? 2014, 15, when we did water meter program. Prior to that, Hamlet residents short of Lake Newell Resort never had water meters in the hamlets. You could run your faucets all day and nobody cared. We should have. We should have cared, but we didn't. So hence the water meter program, right? To try to curb the enthusiasm to wastewater. Let's get to the conservation side of things, because we know water does work wonders around here, and without water, it's semi-arid desert and nothing would be here. So efforts to try to get a handle on these things are there. We're not well refined at moving into it yet because of all of the other programs and projects and things that we have on the go. But it is one of those things that we do want to get in and start verifying at random.
So that water leak that Blaine spotted when the water was actually running down the ditch, that's not NRSC's job to notice it and fix it? That's the county's job?
That would be a combination of both, and that will be a discussion with that agency moving forward that hasn't taken place yet. But any of those sorts of things, you know, to talk about those sorts of things anytime that a hydrant is used for flushing water systems in a hamlet where hydrant systems are present, that is water loss. That contributes to the loss. So we need operators to say it came out of a 3-inch port, we blew water out of it, flushed water out of it for a 10-minute period, and here is the estimated volume that went through it. That is an operational thing. We're going to have some of that. So right now, the water loss that we're showing in the systems, some of it is due to operational things. But how much of it is actual leaks or theft or other things that are going on that we don't know? Because I believe that all of those numbers should be tightened up pretty tight. We should be in good standing order. The efforts that we went through in Scandia, we found our biggest problem in the hamlet, but that number still doesn't make sense to me as to why the water loss is where it's at. Tilly needed massive improvements across all fronts, water and wastewater, same thing. The Tilly number should be sitting pretty good as well. Lake Newell Resort, sure, but I've heard other things from residents as well. Things that are buried don't make it easy to figure out without spending a lot of money. We've been in Rolling Hills twice, digging up the same intersection just on the southeast corner of the school parcel for a water leak. You get it all fixed, and then a different valve starts to leak because you loosened everything up. Try to do it affordable, try to make it accountable, and sometimes it just doesn't play out for us, but we're continually trying to get a handle on that water leak stuff. And in the budget document, you can see what the expectation is of how we escalate what we're doing, but we're just having trouble getting to those escalation points and what we're actually going to formulate to do. H2O water samples, so Alberta Environment, consistent water sampling from the same location within key points of hamlets. Putting operators in people's homes, asking people to allow operators into their homes. Not always the best case these days. You never know what's going to happen. So these are just little green boxes that come out of the ground, stand about 4 feet tall, have an opening, they have a tap in it, they'll flush the water out of it, and then they'll take the grab sample. That's what this is all about, so that we have consistent access to our infrastructure to do that random sampling and testing. And that is legislated components from Alberta Environment. Water meter reader, that information and technology is outdated now, so time to replace. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the reader and it's the software. So every 7 to 10 years, we can probably bank on $30,000 or more to keep those things going.
Maybe just for council's information, can you tell us how long it takes to read meters for our meter reader?
We drive into a hamlet and we drive out of a hamlet. because it's all remote reading. Like Russ might have to drive a couple of streets, but he's just driving at whatever the speed limit is and he picks them all up when he's gone because it's all electronic. Prior to that, and City of Brooks used to walk around, read your meter, then they had the gun that used to tap on your wall, and some, ACO Gas still has people doing that in some locations rather than their auto dialer in and out. Yeah, it used to be very labor intensive, but we never had water meters before. So when I moved to this, it was just a snap of the fingers and we had it all done again, right? So very, very effective. It would be even better if we could get something set up that we didn't have to go anywhere, that it just automatically came here. But we're talking about a region that's vast and transmission of information and SCADA information and stuff. We do have in our water wastewater facilities, but to tie it back to every residence, I don't know where we're quite really at with technology yet, but I'm sure we're getting close. So good there.
With the water sample stations, Lake Noel Resort, yeah, there's no commercial availability, but the rest of the hamlets, the arenas, the community halls, and stuff like that, is it really that difficult to get in and get a sample of water, or do we really need to spend money on a hydrant?
Sometimes it's a matter of where on the system they take the sample. So they want to be further away from the water distribution center. They want to get towards those outlying areas to see what that quality of water is and whether we're flushing often enough or not often enough, whether those chloramines are still sitting in the system so that there's no human health risk. So yes, there's some places, but it's been discussed, and we do have our best laid plan to meet Alberta environment satisfaction with that. Okay, wastewater. Not a whole lot going on in wastewater, but preventative maintenance. Sewer line flushing, one of the favorite times of anything that we can do in a hamlet, because we get to discover what's going on with the pipes. You're jetting a bunch of water down there, and then you're doing, sometimes you're just flushing, other times you're also doing a CCTV inspection coming back on a clean line to see where your cracks are, where your faulty pipes are, and things like that. So getting into our preventative maintenance mode, just as Roberta talked to you about preventative maintenance on IT infrastructure and stuff, this is where we're at with those systems. And other than that, it's the rate increase to those benefactors of a sewer system. Obviously, we have nothing on the rural side because you each take care of your own private sewer disposal systems, right?
Just a curiosity question, how often do we have to do sewer line flushing?
Well, that's an interesting one because we run a lot of small systems. We don't have a major system like the City of Brooks does with major trunk mains in it. So we're still kind of exploring this to determine what our best practices should be and what the frequencies should be. We haven't done anything in Scandia since we put the new system in. We haven't done anything in Tilly since we put the new system in. Thankfully, we haven't had any sewer line backups, because the preventative maintenance would alleviate any of those issues from coming. Lake Noel Resort, never had to do anything down there, so these are some of the areas that we're starting to dabble and get into this mode of things. So Lake Noel Resort has one major main that runs from one end to the other, so probably one time every 5 years we should maybe be looking at that. But once we get into these things and we discover what we see, we'll be able to better derive those formulas with NRSC as to what the best laid plan might be. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't move into the neighborhood that flushes all their grease and oils and everything down the drain and it plugs up the system, because those things change things. I know from my former life, auto body shops and things with paints and other meat processing and things like that. All that stuff used to go down the drain, right? Well, we got legislation and stuff that doesn't allow that anymore, but that's what used to happen. And we don't have a lot of that in our community, so it should just be the household waste. But community engagement, we still advertise the unflushables. Please take note of the unflushables. Don't recommend it in your own private sewer disposal system either. But we used to find blue jeans in our system and like whole pairs of pants. Like, how did those get there? Because they didn't go down the toilet. Somebody must have lifted a manhole and threw some waste away that they didn't want to throw in the trash. We don't appreciate it, neither do the operators, and nobody should really appreciate it because that all affects your end rates for your utilities, right? We want efficient working systems. We don't want roof leaders tied into the wastewater system that is causing more electrical pumping and pump hours at the lift stations and more capacities at the lagoons and stuff. Those are some of the other things we'll be engaging council on over the next 4 years as to how we can gain efficiencies in our systems and keep those costs lower for our ratepayers. So that would be wastewater. No other questions? Waste management, another one of my, call them easy peasy budget items, just like the airport. Newell Regional Solid Waste Management Association is the one that ships the numbers over to the county. These are all under agreements, and this is where it sits. Otherwise, the only other thing in waste management, and I spoke to this at your orientation, the Hamlet of Tilly has door-to-door collection service. That is a tendered service provision, and that is 100% cost billed back to those users. Nobody else bears that cost. It is not subsidized by the general taxpayer. Everybody else in the other hamlets is driving their waste to a transfer station of sorts, short of Lake Newell Resort that has their own compactor that they pay for. Questions?
Does this include recycled waste, like leaves and grass and all that stuff?
Yeah, through NRSWMA, this will have all your recycling costs and everything as well, because they manage all those sheds and stuff that end up in the hamlets and transfer stations.
So if the hamlets wanted to put a recyclable waste depot in, that would be their responsibility to do that themselves, or is it something that the county would entertain, or?
Can you elaborate a little bit further from what you currently have at the resort,
right
maybe?
Now we're dumping branches, leaves, grass, and everything into a trash compactor, and that's not the best use. So just options, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
The only facility that I'm aware of is if you drive it into the city of Brooks, where they have that. And then I believe these days they truck it out to the landfill where they have their compost machine and they turn it all over there. There used to be a site in the city of Brooks boundaries on some industrial property, but I think they finally got the land sold and made better use of it.
Other questions? Good.
Thank you very much. If anything does come up, Matt can receive them. And planning and development, geez, Jeff's not here. That's right. Planning and development, municipal intern grant. Same thing. We heard about this orientation. We're looking at building service capacity within the department, gaining some of that succession planning and whatnot within the department, seeing where we can go. The department's taken on subdivisions and other permit approvals and stuff since bringing all the planning and development in-house. And that's really what they're trying to build through that with the grant. Whether we get approved for it or not, who knows? We'll see where it goes. Planning services, land use bylaw rewrite, that was done this year. We have some MDP work and IDP work and stuff that we're going to be going through, so I'm sure planning services will still need to be utilized. And then surveyor fees going down as well, because we've gotten out of, well, we're not quite out of head gates yet, but we're getting there. So really lots of statutory planning and other legislative work that needs to be done there, but internal capacity will fulfill most of it with the exception of some assistance from planning services.
Councillor, please.
I just noticed that we do have a municipal grant waiting for the municipal intern. We did not do that for the IT. Any particular reason?
Well, if municipal affairs would have an IT stream, we would gladly apply for the grant program. So currently there's 3 streams available under the municipal intern program that municipal affairs manages: finance, land use planning and administration. I mean, that'd be a great lobbying effort to get them to add IT.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, you're up.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just want me to go ahead, Arno?
Absolutely.
All right.
Keep us wide-eyed here.
Well, Mark got you through the lunch sleepy, so that's good. He's always got lots to say, and it's always greatly appreciated. But anyways, I think not a whole lot, we hope, doesn't change too much ag services-wise. Still planning on doing the same services that we've always provided. The outset, I guess, of we don't get to sell strychnine anymore, so you can see that was an expense that came off. It's also a revenue that came off because we sold that at cost. What else? Yeah, so that's kind of our chemical budget. We kind of learned recently that we maybe never budgeted appropriately for chemicals because they're looking at a 30 to 50% increase. So hopefully we were lucky to have some carryover from last year, so that should be good. And then contract services were up $18,000, and I think that is on the revenue side, not on the expenses side. So that's positive news. That means we're charging people for the work and they're paying us for it. On the capital side of things, we're looking at updating one of our no-till drills, a couple of trucks, which from the presentation we had, looks like we might just be doing one because we might not have 3/4 ton availability to purchase in the 2022 year, but I guess we'll iron that out as we go. The mowers, we have those on a 5-year turnaround, and the trailer is on a 10-year turnaround. So just kind of updating as we go. We have lots of equipment. We just don't want it all to need to be replaced at the same time. So we try to keep things going as best we can.
Any questions for Todd?
That was way too easy. All right.
Question, Councillor Johnson, please.
Coyotes. So you didn't do the program because you didn't feel it was generating enough benefit to the taxpayers, paying for $15 for each coyote killed, or why did you term the program for 2 years?
Yeah, we'd actually received a few concerns about the program, and we always kind of did. From faraway places and from locally about us removing coyotes from the landscape. And so we decided at council that we would maybe take a break for a couple of years, continue our coyote count, and just kind of monitor how many coyote predation concerns we have. And so this will be 2022 will be our second year of doing that monitoring. And if we find that not harvesting enough coyotes off the landscape is detrimental, then we can talk about reinstating that program again. Hearing myself talk, that sounded very political, but I think we just kind of decided to take a 2-year break and then reevaluate everything.
We just still see a lot of coyotes in our neck of the woods, right? And we do generally have confirmed kills, so for us, it's always a concern.
So parks and programs, in the budget lines, there's a few other things that are in here, but generally what we use this one for is Emerson Bridge Park, and then the playground structures around that's what I use it for, the playground structures around the county. So Emerson Bridge, we're hoping to, I guess, utilize some of the MSP grant funding that we couldn't get allocated to build a road, and we couldn't get allocated for a solar project. We kind of made some decisions with the last council that Emerson Bridge Park was good for another upgrade, or should be getting another upgrade, and then of course the pathway that you guys talked about. So that 350 was what we had kind of put in there. Historically, we have a wonderful part of the park that's mostly tenting use, and it's kind of underutilized. So that's where we were going to invest those funds to kind of make that area of the park be better utilized, kind of maybe increase some of the services that are there. I think everybody that does go camping realizes that campers are big. They're RVs, they're not campers anymore, and they have a different level of service that they are maybe starting to expect. So that was just one of the upgrades we wanted to do, as well as the cell phone infrastructure we have there now. I think it's been in since 2009, maybe 2010. It was weak right from the outset. Doesn't work really well sending the signal through the trees, through that foliage. So what a big part, well, I shouldn't say a big part, but about 25% of that $350,000 is actually to improve the cell signal down into the park for emergency services, for enjoyment of the campers and all the rest of that. But it just basically takes the signal from the top of the hill through fiber lines to the bottom and then disperses it, instead of trying to send and receive through all the foliage and all those people at the same time. Kind of bogs the system. So that's kind of the plan. Last year, you'll see we did the kind of a baseball diamond upgrade through the Hamlet Rolling Hills. They had requested that. We put it in the budget and it got passed last year. So we did that upgrade, and I think that should be done for now. I don't think we have any other major park upgrades. So. Any questions on the facility side of things while I'm here? I don't think we just.
Unless council has any other questions about the facility side of things, I think what's in budget we've got.
Use your mic, Matt.
Thanks, pro tip. Yeah, what do we have in budget? Replacing the lobby lights whenever enough of them burn out. So that's kind of just been a carry forward year over year, right? If you want to speak to that.
I didn't, and I think this package is very robust, and I'm sure there's a lot of numbers, but it's all in the details. So I won't get into the details. The lobby lights is a very easy one. They're all T5 lighting. We thought when we built the building, we had them designed to be on a cable system that came down. You could change the lights, run your cable system back up. That's not the way they are. So the last time Joe looked into a specialized lift to get through all the doors and get up to change things, it was a $750 a day lift. So we don't want to, we're too cheap to change the lights until there's enough lights that we need to change the lights. And then we were kind of thinking about, at that time, just saying scrap the T5s, go to LEDs and hope for that 50,000 year or 50,000 hour service. So that's the end of that. Sorry, thank you.
Councillor Christman, please.
Yes, so that leads to the next question. ETA for that project to be undertaken?
We budget for it. I think we've been rolling it forward for the last 3 years. I think there's 6 out of those lights up there that are out now. I don't think that's enough to justify the $30,000 kind of price tag. But if all of a sudden there's 50% of them out and it's not working very good, then I guess that's kind of the ETA. So we put it in the budget to make sure we have it, but it's not a priority unless we need it.
But then that 30 turns into 45, and the flies on those light covers are blocking, even though they're still working, a lot of them are blocking the actual purpose of the light. So just saying.
Oh, I appreciate that. We actually, in the fall, when we change out our HVAC filters twice a year, every 6 months, and then Tina and Patricia, they clean out the lights throughout the building of all the flies. They're just horrible in this building. But anyways, yeah, we've noted the excessive amount of dark spots up there, and we're just too cheap.
Councillor Johnson, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, just what happened to the solar project? Why is that? I guess probably a good one.
Well, it's a really good question. I might not be the best to talk to it, but we just kind of ran into some problems that didn't make it the most efficient use of our money.
Yeah. for the longest time, solar panels have been decreasing in price until the time that we decided we wanted to do a solar project, and they've been going like this. So between the time we had our initial estimate for the project cost, which we had $850,000 in grant funding approved for, between May and June, July, when we got the update, costs went up by over 30%. So shipping container costs went up, the solar panels went up, the metals went up, and it was no longer on sale. So like most people, we want to buy things on sale, and the total cost ended up coming in higher than the grant funding that was available. But that one had, that one did have a payback period of 8 years that it would potentially pay itself back.
Yeah, what's the status now? I just put them on my shop with the 8-year pay period, and it makes total sense to do it. It hasn't gone up too much.
Yeah, currently we don't have anything laid out for moving forward with that project. It's just kind of sitting on the shelf. We told our the vendors that we were working with to let us know when things go back on sale.
Thanks.
Talking about the solar projects, wasn't there any grants at that time when you were looking into that?
Yeah, there was. The grant was limited to $850,000, and the total cost, if I remember right off the top of my head, it was just north of a million. But that million that they quoted was plus minus 30%. I said, well, that's great if it's minus 30% and we come in at 700,000. But if it's going to be plus 30%, we're not comfortable moving forward with that kind of estimate. So I think if we are to pursue that kind of project again, we'd take a little more time kicking it out. So that was the other thing that was a real limiting factor for us with this municipal stimulus program grant is the government initially had a December 31st, 2021, you need to have this money spent. Like we want to stimulate the economy, it has to be done by December 31st. Well, the solar project was number 2. The first project was paving Range Road 14.5 from the stockyards down kind of a thing, right? But we ran into issues with the landowner. So administratively, it wasn't a nice place to be where you're scrambling, trying to find a good project. And then to have the project go from, it looked like we'd have a little bit of wiggle room in the initial estimate to then coming in significantly over the initial budget, plus potentially another 30%. We just didn't want to play with it. I think if we do solar, we want to make sure it's not a rushed job. And there were some concerns that they wouldn't even be able to get the construction done by that December 31st deadline, which is no longer a constraint for us, right? So the province has heard us bellyache and all of our peers bellyache about that December 31st deadline, and they've granted extensions to December 31st, 2022. Moving target, had we known we had maybe a little more time, maybe we would have pursued that solar a little bit more.
Okay, no more questions, we're good? Thanks, Doc.
So there was one item we kind of skipped by on the agenda when we had Stuart in here, and this I put on from Councillor Johnson's comments the other day about STARS and HALO grants. So our STARS and our HALO grants show up under Disaster and Emergency Services, Function 24. We've been providing $2 per capita to STARS, which works out to just over $15,000, and $1 per capita to HALO. So I thought we'd at least open the door for Councillor Johnson to have that conversation with his peers around the table.
Thanks. Initially, I thought it was almost an embarrassingly low number, $7,500. I did a little bit of research over the weekend. Cypress County put in $250,000 last May with a 3-year commitment of $300,000 each. They're only 50 miles away. That's quite a commitment, and I realize that Cyprus uses them more than we do. But then talking to a former councillor, the last council were almost going to give up on Halo totally. So I think that's important funding. I think it has saved, obviously, saved a few lives. But I'd like, before I was going to throw out $10 or $20, but I'm just picking that number out of the air. I'd like to have Halo in here, and whatever they need, we'll probably give them, but let's find out what they need. Like, it was really well received at the forum. We had nobody against STARS or Halo. And it seems like this council is on board for providing that. And if we're going to fund, let's fund. Let's not throw out $7,500. That's basically my case in a nutshell. And I do know Kelly has some tax things. That's just problems. That's just not a reason not to do it.
Okay, thank you. Kelly?
Oh, please don't get me wrong. I'm all in favor for saving lives. Not at all. And we will get clarity once you hear from STARS and from Halo. The big thing to note is that STARS can cover the province. Halo can only cover half of the county of Newell. So, and then to speak to your, my comment about income tax, I want you to keep in mind that if I donate dollars personally, I get a 17% tax deduction off my personal income tax. If we're going to start collecting people's donation dollars, we're taking away that right, or that possibly even that ability to donate anymore, because they're already tapped out on the tax side. So it's a very great service. Both STARS and Halo are excellent. I do think that it's bigger than us. I think it's a provincial problem that we have here, and a unique problem. We're the only place in Alberta that has overlap with two different services. The rest of the province is serviced by STARS. So we do need to learn more about it, and keep your mind open to what we do learn. I'm totally in favor of STARS and Halo.
Thank you. Councillor Short and Councillor Johnson.
Just to make a little correction there, actually with Halo's new helicopter, they can service all of County of Newell with ease. They can leave Medicine Hat, go to Pincher Creek, and then fly to Calgary with no issues. So they can easily get to anywhere in County of Newell and then to Calgary with no issues. So they can easily cover all of County of Newell. Not a problem.
Were we to increase our funding to Halo, where does that come out of?
General taxes.
So you're saying an increase there means we increase taxes unless we're going to take it out of somewhere else?
Yeah, the other option is reducing the transfer to your restricted surplus at the end of the year, right? So this morning when we went through the budget overview and we ended at $2.5 million going into restricted surplus, another option is it would be $2,500 less the additional transfer going to Halo and STARS kind of a thing.
That's all surplus money anyway, right?
Yeah, it's all surplus money, but Matt wants you to have a bigger surplus.
Wow.
Is Halo planning on coming back for another presentation or any kind of request?
Yeah, I think they were here making, well, they gave an update shortly before the municipal election. I had reached out to Paul Carolyn, the manager there, asking him for any additional supporting information. He said they're more than happy to come back and give the presentation again, kind of a thing. So some of the things I was interested in receiving is the number of calls they've responded to at the county, What does the $7,500 that we donate now actually mean in terms of service provision? So is that a flight, a half a flight, not even a flight kind of a thing, right? Because I think once council sees the data and understands the service level that your ratepayers get from Halo, it's a lot easier to kind of have that context and make a decision how much you want to allocate towards them. But in their presentation earlier this year, they are trying to get to a model of having a base level of funding and a commitment level from the municipalities that they service. They're still very motivated to do the fundraising component. It's been limited somewhat by COVID, obviously, but that's kind of the model they suggested they were looking at getting to. Let's secure a reasonable level of funding from municipalities and then fundraise from there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Good. Oh, go ahead, Polly.
Well, it's more general, but I would like to have a discussion about our revenue stream, what we're banking on going forward, of how much income is coming in from linear and that sort of thing, and look at that.
I'd be happy if I could bank on much when it comes to the assessment side of things, right? So linear assessment, we had our big scare last year, and it honestly was a scare because it was a potential to be a total upset for the county. You know, our linear pays for just about 2/3 of everything that is accomplished in the county, and when that gets gutted, that's a real problem. So it's going to be very important for this council to be aware of linear assessment as a risk factor. When we meet with the Minister of Municipal Affairs in Edmonton, that might be one of the items we want to discuss, is where's that conversation going? Because they had indicated that they'd be picking it back up in 6 months or so, but the 6 months or so has kind of come and gone. So it's a positive thing that they're deferring, but the reality is all of those assets that are being assessed are decreasing in value. The lobby is strong, advocating for a change in that formula to gut the value that gets assessed. In our budget, we've been pretty conservative, but we have included a decrease, an assumption that linear assessment is going to decrease year over year by at least 2.5%. We'll see where that shakes out in February, how clear that crystal ball is, and I don't anticipate I'm right. It's not going to be 2.5, it'll be some different number, but it's a big risk. That's why, you know, on the user fees, we've always encouraged council to make incremental movements on your user fees. 3% utility increase, I probably could have come with a 5 or 7%, and that would have got us a lot closer. But, you know, just on the user fees for water sewer, you know, you need to increase revenues by about 48% in Tilly and Lake Newell to be breaking even for operating and capital cost recovery. For a smaller place like Rainier with 12 services, you need to over triple your revenue. And some of those numbers, it's not going to work, right? The numbers aren't going to work to triple it. So I'm not going to recommend that you get there, but we do need to make progress. Long term, I'm not banking on anything. It's uncertainty. It's uncertainty that we have to be comfortable with. In terms of the County of Newell's financial position, you're in pretty good shape to respond to any of these shocks that the province might throw at you. You've got very low debt. It's getting lower. This morning we looked at the capacity of the region to bear taxes. So we've got a 30% tax discount on, I'm going to probably mess them up, 30% on farmland, and I think 35% on the non-residential. So we have some room to move, but we want to start moving now, making those changes so that when the rug does get pulled out from underneath us, you're in a better spot, right? And you don't have to jack things up all in a year. So that's kind of the approach we've been taking with farmland. So years ago, we looked at Todd's ag service budget line and said, well, how much of ag services is actually being funded by the direct beneficiaries of ag services? And farmland wasn't covering it. So we said, well, let's start incrementally making that change. When we get to the point where the farmland tax rate is equivalent to the non-residential rate, you'll be pretty close to covering the ag service budget. I mean, the ag service budget grows over time as well, but these are some of the things that I think are strategies for us moving forward. Let's make some incremental changes now and get ourselves in a good position. In terms of our restricted surplus, you know, I say we've only got 73% of the accumulated amortization charge saved, but that's a whole lot better than many of your peers, right? So, I mean, the sky's falling, but the sky's not falling as bad as it could be, right? So we've always strived, I think, on the administrative side of things, to be a leader among municipalities, finance-wise. We've benefited from the oil and gas development. We're starting to benefit from the solar coming in as well. But really, you know, we need growth, like Councillor Johnson said. If Vulcan County is landing all the solar development and there's something we can do policy-wise to attract that makes sense. That's a conversation that, you know, council is going to want to have. Do you want to be more active pursuing development and attracting that here? Because it's that equation. If assessment goes up, you're all right on the tax side of things, but if assessment's going down, you're going to either have to increase your tax rates or change the bottom line, what services we're willing to provide. I don't think that answered your question, apart from the fact that we're not banking on anything, but we're prepared for. And I think we're in a pretty good spot to model different assumptions, right? Like what happens if we can run those numbers.
I think when these things come up, there's several things to look at. One is, raising taxes to cover that. Another thing is looking at cutting, because that's another option, is cutting things. And a third thing is debt, because we didn't really talk about the phase 2 of the water project when you were talking about it, Mark. We kind of talked a bit, we didn't really talk about it, because if we decide to proceed with that, we're taking in, I don't know, was it $15 million in debt roughly? And the last one hasn't been paid off yet. Is that what we want to do, or do you want to wait and see how things shake out? You know, a discussion item.
Yeah, and I think like Mark said, until we receive that letter from the minister saying we've been approved for that MSI grant funding, you know, there's right around that $5 million mark in cash available today to spend towards that. So 15 less the 5, we're looking at 10, potentially bridge financing it. I mean, there's all kinds of creative ways we can fund that project. Previous council set a $1,500 sign up, so that brings in some dollars there. We could look at borrowing to bridge finance. We could look at doing it as a local improvement, and the landowner pays the cost over a period of 20, 25 years. Once we get that approval back from the minister that we can use MSI, we'll bring it back as a request for decision item for council to consider some different options and alternatives.
Okay, thank you. Just back to the linear assessment discussion. A couple of angles on that. Like, is it the industry that's pushing back to lower the assessment of their infrastructure? One, and secondly, what are the politics around the issue with other municipalities? Because we are probably one of the, not the biggest, but we probably have support from other municipalities that benefit significantly from linear assessment, but some have very little as well, right? So is it a matter of pulling all that money back and then pooling it, or they're just going to pull it into Edmonton?
You know, I think that's been the overarching fear for municipalities that rely on their linear assessment, is that the province would take it all back and, you know, then divvy out from the provincial pot. They haven't shown their cards on that one. We did get together with a number of municipalities that were affected, so Cypress County, Vulcan, and the like. We've had a number of meetings. RMA's been lobbying hard for the province to put the brakes on. The province did put the brakes on it. RMA's also been lobbying for other mechanisms that assist us to collect our linear taxes. So you may have seen recently Bill 77, I think it is, that's been introduced into the legislature that allows us to put a special lien on unpaid linear taxes, so we can go after these guys within a short period of time. I think it's 120 days we can chase these guys. Previous to that, those linear taxes owed to the county by bad actor oil and gas companies, we really couldn't do much with unless we wanted to sick lawyers on them and spend a ton of money and still not be, we're nowhere in line for having a legal claim to that debt they owe us. So yeah, linear is interesting, and the part about, you know, some municipalities being impacted but others not so much, that's where, you know, internally and with our other partners who are affected, because RMA represents all rural municipalities, right? So to get the same level of investment out of them on an issue that's particular to us, maybe a little more difficult than one that impacts every municipality equally, yeah.
There's also a number of gas wells that are being cut off. Twerkson cut off about 600 this year. I don't know what CNRL did, but there's the gas wells continue to get cut off. We don't know at what rate. Depends how much money the government's going to give them to do it.
Yeah, and if the well's not producing for assessment values, you know, it doesn't show up, so we don't get a tax it. But you know, where we're at this year in terms of oil and gas prices is a whole lot better than where we were at the same time year previous. Yeah, it's a risk, right? Our reliance on linear assessment is a risk, and that's why we have made recommendations for increases in user fees, increases in your farmland tax rates, and some modest increases across the other categories, right? Like 2.5% isn't a ton, but nobody likes to see their tax go up by anything. But we are recommending movement on those lines.
Okay.
I think ag is going to take off here anyway, and we'll develop another 50, 60, 70,000 acres of irrigation. We'll get in some processing plants. I wouldn't sweat it. Like, who cares? It's just a challenge. And we've got a lot of good things going on in this area. Like that, well, don't forget that water. That's the key. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Monday afternoon, 20 after 2. What's the next thing on our agenda? I'm going to suggest that we take a short break. A little exercise would do me some good. But
yeah, absolutely. There's two other items that we had on the agenda that involve Mark here: Paving Plan and Hamlet Capacities Assessment, and that'll take care of the itemized agenda items. So yeah, if you want to take a break, take 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's take 10. Yep.
I don't think so.
Okay, shall we reconvene? Let's reconvene. Matt tells me we could easily be out of here in about an hour if we don't get too curious. Yeah. Right?
Great. So I've just asked Mark to cover these last two items on the agenda. 5.31 we're looking at here first, Mark, the paving plan. So I'll just let Mark take it away in terms of where the paving plan came from, some of the history, and where it looks like we're going or not going with paving roads in the future.
Well, it predates me. 2001, the government of Alberta releases some funding for every municipality to study their roads. How you studied your roads was up to you. County of Newell looked at the 1,700 kilometers of road that they had, and they decided that they wanted to look at the roads that were connectors to communities and commodities to points of delivery. And with that, the Crawling Valley Road, the Duck Lake Road, Dutchess Cut Across, the Peltzer Road, as some of you would know it, a number of those roads are the roads that were on the paving list. When I started here in 2008, I believe there was right around $35 million sitting in the paving reserve. And since then, we've paved over 100 kilometers of new pavement that is owned and controlled by the County of Newell. So we just about doubled our paved road inventory since I've been here in my 13 years. With that, what is on this list is the outstanding. And it was AMEC that did the study back in the day. So you have Highway 1A, or Old Highway 1, from Highway 875 to Highway 876, located in Tilly, 8.86 kilometers. You have Township Road 17-2 and Highway 1A, which is east of, south and east of the hamlet of Tilly, to get you out to the Trans-Canada Highway. Back in 2009, I believe it is, the county took the task of looking for a truck route around the west and south limits of the city of Brooks. And the key thing in this is Castles Road, Highway 542 is actually a correction line. So your north-south roads do not align, they're offset. And so that traffic movement is kind of painful. It's quite prohibitive, actually. And we have a number of residences developed on both 15-1 and 15-0 between Silver Sage Road and Castles Road, or Highway 542. So there is a west truck route, north-south route, as well as an east-west, where Silver Sage is projected to go straight east past Highway 873, continue over the hill, and tie into Old Highway 1 over by the Crop Diversification Center south. So you have the north-south leg of that as paving plan priority number 3. Range Road 15-5 from Highway 1 to Township Road 190A, which is down to Castles, where the Agricor facility is. You've got the truck route east-west. You have Latham Road, so all the way from Highway 1 down to Bow City is what you're looking at here, past Latham Colony and whatnot. That is a very vast paving project in itself. And the last one is Township Road 18-4, Phase 2. That is your paving plan to connect communities to communities, commodities to markets. Council has really been the driver behind this entire plan, and it stems from the 2001 study with AMEC. And I guess it's really in your hands now as to where it goes. There are no dates indicated on this plan. This is your paving priority plan. When funding is available, or when you so choose to fund it through alternative means, whether it's grants or pulling funding from elsewhere in the tax base. Matt can speak a little bit to where funding has gone from the paving reserve, so I don't screw it up, because I'm really good at that. I just cannot process from my first days of starting here with the paving plan of having a large sum of money, but money was borrowed to fund other things, and we're paying it back, and I'll shut up because I'll screw it up.
I thought we could just let that rest in history, the ins and outs and which piggy bank we robbed to get projects done, kind of a thing. So with the paving partnerships of the 3-digit highways, down to Rolling Hills Reservoir, from Tilly up to Patricia, we borrowed money from our infrastructure fund to get those paving projects done, because we didn't have the paving money in our paving reserve. So we're kind of paying the paving fund back. There was about $19 million we borrowed from the infrastructure fund. So where our overlays typically would have been funded from the infrastructure fund moving forward, you'll see in the paving restricted surplus fund schedule, that 10-year schedule, we've got a number of overlays coming out of our paving fund. So the special paving tax is going to be funding overlays for the next period of time till we've paid that $19 million back. I mean, it's really 6 of one, half dozen of another, as far as I'm concerned. When there's a priority and council wants to move on it, these are the conversations we have, and we provide you with options of where the dollars are and how to get things done. But that's how we structured getting those 3-digit highways paved. And I think as we heard earlier today, you know, it's a nice wide shoulder on the bit from Kinbrook Island down to Rolling Hills Reservoir. Those were good projects to get complete in the region.
And I guess the important note on this, just for council's information, the estimated paving cost at $600,000 to $800,000 per kilometer. That's all pending site-specific conditions. Some of our road beds are extremely sandy. Some of them have great clay. There's always some kind of constraints or other things that fall into this that we have to work with. So because I think we were talking like 2026 is kind of when we might be able to start talking about these things, unless there's other grants and council dedicates funding through other means. That's why this kind of looks the way that it does. It doesn't have a year really earmarked to it or a value earmarked to it, because we haven't done a whole lot to firm up the estimates on construction. We get our values from some of our previous paving projects like Highway 876 and whatnot to come up with that $600,000 to $800,000 value. So you can take that value and multiply it by the 8.86 kilometers or the 13.10 kilometers of Township Road 17-2 and Highway 1A. The key thing here is that council, it's up to you. This is your opportunity at interim budget and final budget to discuss and change any of the priority that you see fit for whatever justification outside of it. Now, if you want to make some major amendments to it where council isn't choosing what the priorities are and saying when it's happening, and we want to get into like doing traffic counts and doing it on a priority basis because of those sorts of things, then my department has a whole lot more work ahead of it, and it's going to take some more engineering dollars to make that happen for you. But this is what's worked. This is the foundation of what's been here for the past 20 years at Newell. If there's any questions with respect to it, I'll do my best to meet your expectations.
TR 182, what is it, a mile? That was not done originally, and I heard some stories, the reason why, but it's not, didn't make the list. How do we put a priority and get something on the list? Because that's an important one now that the paving is done from past the Rolling Hills Reservoir Campground. That is a major thoroughfare for a lot of people going to Tabor and Lethbridge. So, yeah, that one might want to get on the books. And how do we do that?
If I may suggest, that's between you and your 9 colleagues around the horseshoe to sort out as you see fit. We have been there. There is some history there. We batted that around when we were talking about the stimulus funding grant that came available to us as well, but felt that we couldn't do a mile, which is 1.6 kilometers, because it wasn't going to be sufficient funding, and the former council didn't want to dedicate any other tax dollars to getting that grant or the project off the ground. So we picked things that were within the value of the grant we could receive. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that if there's things in your area that you believe should be or should not be, you can introduce it through council or through administration and we'll bring it, but it's really to get it onto the plan is the 10 of you agreeing, particularly where it falls.
Question, do we have any cooperation from the city working on the truck routes, the 2 truck routes? Do they work with us together or is this solely county?
So when the truck route study was undertaken, the county and city did a joint venture on getting the study complete. Aside from that, my understanding is the city is not part of the development of the route whatsoever. So that is a potential opportunity for yourselves to investigate further if and when the time warrants.
I don't know if we've talked about this or if this has been commented on, but there was a time when the province, I mean the county and the province kind of cooperated on some roads that were maybe county priorities, weren't in the province's radar at all, but and then they probably ran out of money. I know when I was there, there was a few little links that got, I mean the county ended up paying more of it than they technically maybe should have had to, but are those kinds of partnerships happening at all with the province anymore on numbered highways?
Well, so the interesting thing is, this goes back to the day before maybe the province took the 3-digit highways back. Small components of 3-digit highways were done, but there was a different philosophy around the council table where perhaps funding was more sought on individual divisions versus as a whole community of things. Where you've seen those negotiations recently are the Highway 535, 873, and the 876s. And those were done at a 50-50 partnership with the province. That's generally not where the province starts. That's generally a 70-30 split, 30 being the province, because when they get into these agreements, they bear the operational and the future replacement of that infrastructure when they upgrade. And Highway 873 South, for example, like that was like a 6 to 8 lane highway just about on the gravel road, pending which wheel path you wanted to travel in. Still looking at the numbers, the cost per kilometer for when you consider the cost to pave a road, the cost to maintain a road, and the cost to overlay it in the future, the cost to maintain a gravel road is much more affordable than ever going to a paved standard. That is why the province isn't really looking at growing their network, except for where the demand of the traffic needs it. And as you know, a lot of money getting pumped into the 2 major cities, and we're just kind of caught between 3 major centers of Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and Calgary. Highway 1's in pretty good shape, and quite honestly, I had the numbers, I don't have them on me today, but Highway 525 from Rolling Hills East, south to our south boundary, and Highway 862 from north of Gem up to Finnegan Ferry, and then I guess if you wanted to even talk about Highway 862 that's deteriorated, those are the only 2 small stretches of 3-digit highway left in the county of Newell at all. And if you were going to talk about 525, I think there's about another 6 to 10 kilometers outside of our jurisdiction to connect us up to the Hayes Highway that cut across to Redcliffe, that we'd have to work with Cypress to try to partner. In my opinion, I don't think that'd be a good one to proceed with unless all 3 of us came to the table on. But then I really, you know, when Matt's talking about linear assessment and revenues and everything like that, people are Rolling Hills and you know, I don't want to take anything away from anybody, but in a number of communities, we already have other alternatives that are paved to get people places. So it's where this council wants to go with doing things, right? Get Highway 525 paved, yeah, that would be a great benefit to the region too. 862 up to the ferry, that would be too. It would help reinforce the ferry staying in place, because the County of Newell's also been informed that that ferry does not need to stay there. They could pull it just about any time they wanted. So traffic volumes, that's one thing that transportation looks at. And we might think that they're high, but it doesn't take us long to get outside of our local municipality to see where the traffic volumes really are at. And through our region, it's Highway 1 and 36. We might say that traffic volumes are high on some of our roads, but we're nowhere near some of our neighbors.
Any other questions, comments?
Just back to Councillor Screever's question about how to get items on the paving plan. I think, you know, as part of our strategic planning sessions, which we end up engaging a consultant to kind of take us through, we can kick around some of those ideas in a session like that as well. Mark could come back with a request for decision at a council meeting, and we can dig into the paving plan, philosophy behind it, any stretches that council thinks should be added, and we can, you know, formally update the plan in a council meeting. So we could look at, you know, potentially doing that in the new year before final budget.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on this?
Just real quick, I know I saw it in the binder, the overlay outline. Where was it? Because I cannot find the binder now. I don't know where it is.
You bet. So it'll show up. Probably my favorite place to look at it is, let's find it here, paving fund. It'll be behind your restricted surplus tab, and I'll find the page for you. I know, it's ugly, right? It's pretty ugly. Facilities. Page 34 and 35.
I guess while you're looking at that, we strive for a 17 to 20 year outlook on the overlays. That's generally when you start to see pavement degradation to the point that you need to reinvest in that paved surface to preserve the initial investment. So every year that a paved road is out there, we're doing our crack sealing. That's your number one preventative, and then pothole repairs. And other than that, everything else is kind of operational. Like line painting does not serve the surface of the roadway. It's a communication device for motorists. So with what you have in that, we are simply looking at overlaying the roads as they exist today. If council is looking to add a 2 meter wide shoulder onto a road, which I strongly discourage you from adding it for walking and cycling, but if you want a shoulder on the road, those types of things need to be clarified for us, because every time we overlay a road, it gets narrowed by about 6 inches. And those white lines get a little bit closer to the edge of the road. And then eventually when we get that we can't paint the white lines, we're gonna have to strip it all down. Either do a recycling in place kind of strategy, or you mill it all up, take those asphalt chips, use them for other purposes, and then put a asphalt surface back on it again. So there's a number of things that happen, but there are only so many overlays you can go through before you either have to build the shoulders out to be able to get the road back, but you need all that structure of the road base and everything underneath it as well, right? So just for your information. And when we get to those kind of ages of things, right now we're using our own visual observation of what that asphalt looks like. If there's no major changes in it, the Castles Road, many of you would have drove to get there to get to the orientation. There really isn't anything significant wrong with that road. The really fine particulates in that asphalt are gone out of it. You've got larger aggregate. You hear a little bit more road noise as you're driving down it. There isn't anything wrong with that road. It's not rutted in the wheel paths. It's not raveling to create a washboard and a bump in it. There's no major potholes or any other defects in it. Prime candidate for something other than an overlay even. Maybe we do a microsurface treatment that saves money instead of those large overlay jobs. We want to explore all those sorts of things. One Tree Road, man, that thing was almost black with crack sealant because it was cracks everywhere. But the great thing is there wasn't anything wrong with the road. It was great. It was phenomenal, which means your structure is really, really good. So we didn't have to do much for structural repairs or anything before we put the overlay on. But we're doing visual observation of those things, and then when we're getting towards that age, then we want to engage an engineering firm to come in, and they do falling weight deflectometer testing. You'll probably see transportation does that about every fall, about the time they go to start throwing on weight restrictions and stuff on the roads. We don't ban our roads, by the way, just so you all know. If you have a concern about a road, we'll talk, but road ban committee will meet once to say we had a meeting, and that'll be your meeting for the year. Hopefully we don't have to meet over anything else. But we'll get an engineering firm in. They'll do whatever kind of non-intrusive and or intrusive testing if they need to take cores of the road and whatever else, see what kind of structure's there. And they will come back with a report with their best recommendation of what kind of treatment we should apply to those roads moving forward to have the best investment for our taxpayer. It's not just we have this standard and that's all that we do. That's kind of the general philosophy around pavement. If you're going to run it out, you might get a road for 30 years. You might get a road for 40 years. Some prematurely fail for maybe it's poor construction of the day, even through quality assurance, quality control in your building. It just happens sometimes. Other times you see well beyond the useful life of what you thought that paved surface was just because you've been keeping up with the preventative maintenance side. And we've actually had Alberta transportation staff tell us, your roads are excellent because you keep reinvesting in the preventative maintenance. You keep putting the crack sealant down, you keep filling the potholes, you keep doing those things. You're getting more life out of it than what the province is capable of affording on their network. So, questions there?
Any further questions? We're good? Oh, Councillor Christopher.
So, just a quick question. How far does the County of Newell go towards Crowfoot Ferry? How close would we get? Do you know offhand? When you mentioned paving to the Finnegan Ferry, I thought, what about our ferry on the west side? How close would we get?
Crowfoot is outside of the County of Newell boundary, and I want to say it's by about 4 miles.
Oh, that far.
I think. Is it only 2?
Pardon me? No, it's not. It's probably near the railroad track, isn't it?
That's what I wondered, if it went past the railroad track or not.
It's, yeah, it's that access road is further west than our boundary. We don't have the gravel road leading down to that ferry. No, you're well outside of Newell by the time we get there.
That's right. That's off the end of Highway 56.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's 2 or 4 miles. Okay, the second, sorry. Nothing else?
Who was speaking?
Yep, if we're willing to carry on. The second one is the Hamlet Capacities Assessment. So this is something that Jeff undertook with the engineers to review what we have for water, wastewater capacities within our urban centers. And I believe Matt pointed it out in the budget document to refer to this page, which is the summary and conclusions of things. If you really want to get into the details and put yourself to sleep, it's read the whole document, but this is where you go. Executive summaries and summary and conclusions, that's what you want to look for out of everything for the Coles Notes version. So Hamlet of Rolling Hills, low pressure wastewater system. So each residence out there has a septic tank. They have a sump pump in that septic tank that pumps their sewage out to the sewer system and in a forceful manner pumps it to the lift station. In most other situations, you have a gravity sewer system that is all at grade and your wastewater flows downhill to a lift station and then it gets pumped out to the lagoon. Instead, this community has a pressurized system, and is the only one in Newell. So that system does not have capacity to accommodate new developments. Additional water and wastewater infrastructure would need to be installed to utilize the available capacities in the regional supply pipeline, storage reservoir, lift station, and wastewater lagoons. So this is telling you what can and cannot happen within the hamlets. If there's going to be further development, we need to do something with the wastewater system. And that could simply be a direct connection to the lift station, because it's only the piping to the lift station right now that's the restrictive. It's not the lift station as it sits. Hamlet of Tilly, based on historical flows, lift station operates at capacity during periods of peak flow and does not have the capacity for new development. Erroneous flow measurement or significant stormwater inflow within the collection system could be the cause of lift station's capacity. So, something challenging. We've advertised this as a public education engagement kind of thing, but we haven't pursued it. Some people have their foundation drains or weeping tile tied into the sewer system. Some people may even have their roof leaders tied into their foundation drains, which is tied to the sewer system. That ties up capacity in the pipelines, and it ties up additional capacity at the lagoons, because it's fresh water. It doesn't need to be treated like your wastewater does. Get that out of there, and we might find that we have additional capacities to expand and grow. Tilly's potable water and wastewater collection infrastructure has undergone significant upgrades over the past several years and is suitable for long-term expansion and growth. Yeah, that's Tilly. Hamlet of Patricia, potable water reservoir, has minimal capacity for new development and is the limiting factor within the hamlet. So this is the reservoir underneath the distribution center. All new development should be reviewed to determine the potential impact on potable water storage requirements. What we would do here is, if somebody came forward with a development, we would ask them as a developer to work with their engineers to review our infrastructure to determine whether their development could proceed. We wouldn't bear that cost whatsoever. They would have to have their engineers review it and design it and meet our satisfaction. Wastewater system has capacity to accommodate new development. However, construction of a facultative cell will be required if treatment objectives or additional capacity is required in the future based on Alberta Environment's new code of practice. Hamlet of Patricia currently has single cell sewage treatment. You need a facultative cell and a storage cell, and there are requirements for how long each of those treatment cells need to store stuff for. Typically a 12-month period, I believe, is what it is. We had been in those discussions before. We weren't capable of securing land. We were looking at alternatives for Patricia, and things got too expensive. We were up in the $3 million mark. And we had grants secured to help Patricia out. However, the Hamlet Advisory and Community forgave those grants, and here we sit. Hamlet of Scandia, regional supply pipeline has the least amount of available capacity for Scandia and is the limiting factor for new development. The wastewater lift station has similar available capacity to the regional supply pipeline and is the next limiting factor within the hamlet. So you have water supplies being one thing, wastewater the other. When we did the water and wastewater treatments in the hamlet, 2% growth was accommodated into those calculations. Came up in discussion at the Hamlet advisory meetings. But it's only 2% growth, right? There's not much there. The challenging time at that point was, well, why are we paying for additional? Well, you want to plan effectively. If you want growth, you need capacity. You don't just dig up a new pipeline and run a new pipeline again because it looks foolish. Hamlet of Rainier. Rainier's infrastructure is not suitable for typical residential, commercial, or industrial development. The county should consider rural residential development with cisterns for the areas around Rainier, as the infrastructure has capacity to support this type of development. So looking at taking Rainier off of the typical Hamlet potable water system and putting them on the rural distribution system, which is a trickle system, and then each of them have their own septic systems, private sewer disposal systems as they currently sit. We don't have communal out there. Lake Newell Resort, the area has the greatest available capacity for development. The existing wastewater collection system has the least amount of available capacity and is the limiting infrastructure component. Available capacity in the area is conducive to a wide range of potential development. So Lake Newell Resort right now, all of the sewage flows to a lift station which gets pumped to the city of Brooks, which then gets pumped further to the city of Brooks lagoons. We pay the city of Brooks each year, which is billed back through utility fees. So with that, there is a study saying, I cannot recall off the top of my head, there's another like 400 lots that I think can be developed, but there's going to have to be an additional lift station constructed and potential twinning of the lift station line, if I've got it off the top of my head. So those are the kinds of things that you have in your hamlets that are limiting your growth. To speak aside from this, the regional water system was designed with some additional capacity in the transmission main, the regional transmission main. So tying off of that so that we could get the rural component done was there. For every unit that comes on, it means that there might be not a unit available for somebody that wants on later because some people are taking 2 units or 3 units for service, right? But that's really where you sit with your hamlets. Rolling Hills is working. We're finding more failures in the water and the wastewater system, more repairs, dig ups. They're not frequent, but just about guaranteed a couple every year. Hamlet of Tilly, we've been really, really good. That community had been on a boil water advisory for like 3 years. They had hydrovac trucks or vac trucks out there sucking the effluent out of their lift station because their pumps were always down. What a change in that community. And even when we did that community, they had 2 lift stations in it. We decided to go with a significantly deeper lift station to limit it to 1. A general lift station is about $750,000. So that's a pretty big cost up front before you even get any pipe in the ground. So eliminating the replacement of a secondary lift station, eliminating the regular ongoing and operational costs and inspecting that lift station daily, we got it down to 1, but it's 35 feet deep. It's deep. We don't want to dig it up. We thought we were going to hit water table and have to send scuba divers in when we were digging it, but Tilly was the driest place we've ever been for any pipe installation, period. It was amazing. Couldn't have gone better. Patricia, we have some work to do in Patricia. We have a project to replace some segment of wastewater line, but we're monitoring that since we're into the winter season here. We didn't get it done earlier in the year, so it'll be carried forward to 2022, but we still have discussions that have to take place and decisions that have to be made. Scandia, that went great. Support from the community was great when we did it, just as it was in Tilly, and really no issues. We just need to get a handle on that, on the water side of things with what's going on with our discrepancies of what we're billing and what we're losing. Hamlet of Rainier, it's more of that rural type development, just as it says, and I don't want to say we were right or we were wrong, but maybe we should have gotten away from the distribution center when we did go through the changes and whatnot, but it is where it is. So we'll continue to work with that and move forward as we have here. And Lake Newell Resort, it's developing slowly. It's lots of lots for sale and available out there, but it's going slowly, but we have had a few new housing starts out there in the recent past years. So. Any questions about the hamlets or anything that this might have to say?
I just had an observation. Scandia improved in population, I shouldn't say quite a bit, but yeah, a few, and Tilly went the opposite way. So one would have thought that once those services were in place and the curb and gutter and the streets paved, that it would have really attracted more population.
I can say that those 2 communities look phenomenal. From where they were and where they are now, from the investment of the ratepayers, it's incredible. Really, really is. Discussion of economic development was already on the table today. It's a matter of where this council wants to focus and how you want to see things happen. These are the outlying factors of what can and cannot happen within the communities. And I guess to reiterate what Matt said, strategic planning session, what do you want to see? Do you want to invest in economic development? Do you want to invest in your hamlets? What do you see happening? Or do we wait for people to come here instead? So just thought we should deliver this message to council anyway to get you up to speed. I'm sure there will be many more things over the next 4 years that we bring forward to get you more up to speed and get more into the trenches with things, but that's the high level overview for you, and feel free to read the rest of it if you care.
Scandia had 2 new businesses open in 2021, and that probably hasn't happened since, I don't know, 1942, so it was pretty exciting. Yeah, we have a big fertilizer place now and a coffee shop.
Now, Councillor Short.
Has there ever been a study to replace the force main in Rolling Hills to a gravity drain?
Yeah, and I think we're around $3 million. And through consultation with the Hamlet Advisory and annual general meetings where some of the public come out, where we presented some of those options and alternatives, a lot of feedback is the community is a retirement community. I have a sense that some of that is changing. But when you're on a fixed income, it's very difficult to try to swallow $1,500 or $2,000 a year in local improvement fees. And the system's working. It's not where we would like to have it, but it is working. So trying to make some decisions on affordability. This again is really where I proposed to you at orientation through the MGA, particularly through wastewater. Wastewater services can't be petitioned out if council does determine that it's an absolute need for the community. It's not the exact language of the MGA, but wastewater systems are not petitionable out. So you can work with that, but it's just a very sensitive subject when you start forcing the hands of people that can't afford things, right?
Okay, any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
I'm just actually reading the report a little more. So when they say there's limited development, there's actually still room for a fair bit of development. What they're calling limiting is that they're saying Scandia could handle a 209-room hotel. That's still a lot of capacity in rural life.
And when you look at the different types of development, it's a matter of, you know, a hotel is not 100% occupied 100% of the time. Whereas your homes, you generally look at about 2.5 persons per home, per residence, consuming X per day. So they have a number of factors based on the Canadian average, based on more localized averages and stuff being driven into these calculations and stuff. So this isn't us coming up with things, and it's generally not the engineers either. It's here's your system, here's what we see happening, here's the sizing of your pipe, here's the Canadian averages, here's your localized averages, and they're pulling it all together so that we get a real good picture of what can and cannot happen.
It's just nice. When I saw with the first, I thought, oh boy, you know, all this build up in the communities, we can't do anything. I'm actually reading and going, wow, there still is a lot of things that could be done in Hamlets. Lots.
Yeah, that's right. Any other comments or discussion with regard to this? If not, we're close to the end of our day, aren't we?
Oh, you're so close, but then Matt's going to take the mic and get back on his soapbox. I just want to thank staff for all the effort they've put into pulling a good, I think a pretty conservative budget together, and for council entertaining the review process. What I heard, kind of the homework that I've jotted down today, is we'll get Halo in here for a presentation when they can get in here. So I'll reach out to Paul and see if he'll come back with some specific information for us. We'll get the paving plan on an agenda early in the new year. That's what I heard for homework. If I've missed any homework, you let me know. Sometimes we have changes to numbers between now and December, that fall out of this meeting, but I didn't hear any real passionate pleas to include something in the budget or exclude those mountain bikes from the budget. So what we'll do is we'll sit on this and we'll bring back this same budget to the December 9th meeting for approval. If between, you leaving today and you're driving home and you've got questions, that's fair. We can still change the interim budget between now and December 9th. So if there's things you think of between now and then, just send the email out, CC all your counselors so we can have that information come. We can always put things on a council agenda and be in a good spot to pass the interim budget December 9th. But apart from that, good questions. I think good conversation. Budget's always one of those things, right? Are we doing enough? Are we saving enough? Are we reinvesting enough in the infrastructure? Are we supporting and growing the community the way council wants to see it done? So hopefully you've learned a lot from our department heads. And with that, I'll turn it back to Reeve Dirksen.
Thank you, Matt. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I talked to a few of you about this. I had approached by AIPA just because they know me, the Irrigation Districts Association. They would like to make a presentation to this council just to bring us up on what the issues are in irrigation. And at whatever meeting, if you want to wait till after New Year or you want to take care of your budget, doesn't matter. But I just want it, before I tell them to come in, I want to make sure that it fits in schedule at the right time.
Yeah, I think we can entertain a delegation probably anytime. So if you have them reach out to me, we'll get...
I'll give you their number. You can reach out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll get it on an agenda.
I got a whole list of guys I'd like to haul in here, but I want somebody else to do the next one.
Oh, sorry, I thought I had turned it there. Okay. No, I think those are excellent suggestions, and I think for our own awareness and to stay current with what's out there, I think the opportunity to meet with ratepayers, the larger groups that pay a significant tax base, like JBS and others, Torx, and maybe those are excellent ideas, and I would suggest that maybe we put those forward to Matt and we can assemble those. And I think that should be a routine part of what we do, is to educate ourselves about opportunities in the area, and appreciate those suggestions. So let's move forward with that as we go. I mean, this meeting was primarily about an interim budget, but we're going to have a regular meeting Thursday, and then those will be every 2 weeks from there on. So I think that's something that we should certainly keep on our agenda. Thank you for all of your input today, and for staff for the excellent presentation. I think we've successfully, for now at least, put what might have been a 2-day meeting into 1 day, which is good for all of us, I think. And certainly this is part of pretty strong orientation. I appreciate what we've had in terms of orientation, and certainly as a ratepayer, as someone who has taken, when we didn't sit around this table, we probably didn't have to pay too much attention to the detail, but I'm impressed with the detail that's there, and the depth of both detail and the quality of people that we have working for us is appreciated. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. I think, do we need a motion to adjourn the meeting? I don't think so. We're just going to do it. So we'll see you all on Thursday. Pardon me?